You remember how the light felt in the last section. Steady, warm, reassuring. But then there's that other feeling that creeps in, the one that tries to smother it. Fear. The kind that doesn't shout but whispers. The one that hides in your what-ifs, your worst-case scenarios, your sleepless nights. You know the voice. It's the one that says, you're not ready. You're not enough. What if this falls apart? And then, right in the middle of all that noise, comes another voice, gentle but unshakable. Do not be afraid. You've probably heard those words before. They show up again and again throughout the Bible, but somehow, every time they sound new. Maybe it's because fear wears different faces depending on where you are in life. Sometimes it's about money. Sometimes it's about health. Sometimes it's about being alone or about not being enough for the people who depend on you. Fear adapts, but so do those words. Do not be afraid. They always fit. You think about what those words must have sounded like when Jesus first said them. To the disciples trembling on a boat, seeing him walk across water. To the women at the empty tomb, trying to understand what had just happened. To ordinary people facing extraordinary uncertainty. He never said it to dismiss their fear. He said it to remind them they weren't alone in it. You start to feel that difference. Because so much of the advice you hear today says things like just be fearless, as if courage means never being scared. But that's not how Jesus framed it. His words carry something quieter, something deeper. He doesn't say, don't feel afraid. He says, do not be afraid. It's an identity thing. You may feel fear, but you don't belong to it. It doesn't define you. You think about your own moments of fear. Maybe standing in a hospital waiting room. Maybe staring at a job rejection email. Maybe sitting in silence after a fight you didn't know how to fix. You remember how small you felt, how everything seemed uncertain. You remember how the light felt in the last section. Steady, warm, reassuring. But now, another feeling starts to creep in, subtle yet persistent. Fear. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't stomp across the room or grab your shoulders. Instead, it whispers. It lingers in the spaces between your thoughts, the corners of your mind, the quiet hours when everything else fades away. You know the voice. You're not ready. You're not enough. What if this falls apart? And then, through the jumble of doubts, another voice cuts through, gentle, steady, unshakable. Do not be afraid. For simple words, and yet they feel like the weight of the world lifted off your chest. Words that don't rush, don't demand. They simply hold you. You've heard them before, over and over. Yet today, they land differently. Maybe it's because fear isn't static. It wears different faces. Financial worries, health concerns, relational doubts, insecurities about your purpose or worth. And just as fear changes shape, so do these words. They meet you exactly where you are. You imagine the first time Jesus spoke them. To the disciples trembling on a boat, water slapping the sides, wind roaring in their ears. To the women at the empty tomb, unsure, afraid, hearts racing, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Ordinary people in extraordinary moments, unsure how to move forward. And yet, he doesn't dismiss their fear or shame them for feeling it. He meets them in it. Do not be afraid. He reminds them that fear is real, but does not define them. It's striking because so much of the advice we hear today equates courage with absence of fear. Just be fearless, the world says, as if bravery is denial. But that's not how Jesus frames it. His words carry a quieter, deeper power. He doesn't erase fear. He reclaims it. He says, you may feel fear, but it does not own you. That's liberation. A subtle permission to acknowledge what's real without letting it control your life. And now you begin to notice a rhythm in the words. Not a rushed, urgent rhythm, but a slow, steady pulse like a heartbeat. Do not be afraid. Jesus says it not once, not twice, but again and again throughout the scriptures. Each time, it's slightly different, tuned to the situation, tailored to the moment. Sometimes it's for survival, sometimes for courage, sometimes for hope. The consistency is the comfort. Fear may be new, but his reassurance never changes. No matter the circumstance, these words are always relevant, always timely, always right where you need them. You think about the disciples in that stormy boat. They've been living with Jesus, following him day after day, and yet fear gripped them when they saw him walking on water. Their faith was real, but their humanity was stronger in that moment. And Jesus doesn't condemn them. He doesn't say, "You shouldn't be afraid." He simply reminds them of the truth. Do not be afraid. And you start to see the beauty in that. Courage isn't about never feeling fear. It's about holding the fear lightly, letting it exist without letting it define you, and stepping forward anyway. You start to trace that through your own life. The moments you froze, the nights you lay awake over doubts and anxieties. Maybe it was standing in a hospital corridor, waiting for news you couldn't control. Maybe it was a job rejection email blinking on the screen, reminding you of uncertainty. Maybe it was the silence after a fight, the kind that made you doubt if reconciliation was possible. And yet, even in those moments, you noticed tiny sparks of bravery. You got up. You continued. You made a choice to keep moving. Fear was there, yes, but it did not own the story of your life. And this is the shift Jesus wants you to feel. Not that fear disappears, but that you see it differently. Not as a chain around your ankles, but as a shadow you can walk through. Not as a judge, but as a companion that reminds you of the need for faith. As you dwell on this, another layer begins to unfold. You start to picture Jesus saying these words. Not from a distance, not as a lecture, not with disappointment or expectation, but close enough to feel his presence, to hear the calm in his tone. There's no judgment. No, you shouldn't be afraid scolding. Only knowing, understanding, and a gentle insistence that your fear does not define you. He's been through darkness himself. The night before his crucifixion, he faced fear so profound it could have crushed him. And yet, he chose faith over surrender. That is why his words carry weight. They come from someone who has walked through the deepest shadows and still trusted. You realize fear today wears new masks. It doesn't always roar. Often, it scrolls through your feeds, measures your worth against strangers, whispers comparisons and deadlines, says your dream is too late or your voice too small. And yet, the same ancient words pierce the noise. Do not be afraid. Not because the world has changed or danger disappeared, but because you are seen, because you are known, because you are held. And you don't need to face fear alone. You take a breath, really take one, and maybe for the first time in a long while, you feel the energy that fear has been stealing from you. You sense how much you have shrunk, how many steps you've avoided, how many dreams you've postponed simply because fear was louder than faith. And now, those words, do not be afraid, don't feel like a command. They feel like permission. Permission to breathe, permission to move, permission to step forward into uncertainty, knowing you're not walking it alone. And as you let that sink in, you notice another shift. Courage is no longer something distant, something to strive for, something earned by ignoring fear. It's closer, quieter, and always available. Courage is a choice, moment by moment. It's faith that is louder than fear. And in that choice, you begin to feel a subtle thrill, a spark of confidence. And then you start to notice how these words, do not be afraid, connect to everything else you've been learning along this journey. The storms you've calmed, peace be still. The people you've forgiven, love your enemies. The light you've started to shine, you are the light of the world. Fear, you realize, doesn't exist apart from these truths. It intersects them, tries to dim the light, tries to tug you off course. And yet, Jesus' words meet that fear directly, reminding you that courage, faith, and divine presence are stronger than any shadow. You begin to see the subtle patterns of life where fear used to dominate. The small, ordinary moments suddenly take on new significance. The trembling before an important conversation, the hesitation to share a piece of your heart, the doubt that creeps in when pursuing a dream that feels too big. And in each of these moments, there's a choice to shrink back, to give fear the final word, or to move forward with faith. You realize slowly that courage isn't a sudden eruption. It's incremental, invisible to the outside world, yet cumulative in its effect. Each step you take in spite of fear builds a quiet momentum that carries forward far beyond the moment. You think about the rhythm of life itself, how it mirrors this dynamic. The ordinary and the extraordinary, joy and struggle, certainty and doubt, they coexist. Fear doesn't get to vanish entirely. It's part of being human, but neither does it get to define you. The presence of fear becomes almost a measuring stick for faith, showing you where courage can grow, where trust in God can deepen. The moments that used to feel heavy with anxiety now shimmer with opportunity. Each hesitation is a chance to practice faith. Each trembling step is an invitation to trust. And in that trust, you begin to sense something extraordinary. Fear, when acknowledged but not obeyed, becomes a doorway rather than a barrier. And now, as you breathe deeply, you feel the weight and the freedom of these words settle into every corner of your being. Do not be afraid. They are no longer abstract, distant, or theoretical. They are here, in your chest, in the rhythm of your life, in the pauses between your thoughts. You begin to notice that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to step forward despite fear, to move even when the path is uncertain, to trust even when doubt whispers relentlessly. And with every small step, you realize that faith is stronger than the moments that try to shake you. You start to see life differently. Fear may still whisper, but it no longer commands your attention. It's present, yes, but it's now held lightly, framed by trust and divine guidance. You feel the liberation in acknowledging fear without surrendering to it. You realize that the moments you once thought were failures, the times you hesitated, the nights you lay awake anxious and unsure, they're all part of the same sacred story. Each act of bravery, no matter how small, is a thread weaving a tapestry far bigger than your immediate perception. You imagine standing in the presence of Jesus, hearing him speak these words directly to you, not as a distant teacher, not as a voice on a page, but here and now, alive and immediate. His eyes are steady, full of knowing, not judgment. There is no shame, no criticism, only presence, reassurance, and unwavering truth. Do not be afraid. These words are both shield and fuel. They protect you from the weight of fear while also energizing you to step into life fully, intentionally, courageously. And you begin to see that this courage is not about perfection. It is not about eliminating every doubt, every worry, every anxious thought. It is about persistence. It is about showing up moment by moment with faith that even the smallest steps matter. Every act of kindness, every decision to forgive, every instance of patience or presence. You feel it before you even say the words out loud. How heavy forgiveness can be. It sits in your chest like a stone, familiar and solid. Forgive 70 times 7. You almost laugh when you hear it. It sounds impossible. Who would do that? Forgive that many times? You picture someone actually trying, counting on their fingers, losing track halfway, starting over again. But Jesus wasn't giving you a math equation to solve. He was dismantling the idea that forgiveness has a limit. He was telling you something radical. That love doesn't keep score. And that realization stings, doesn't it? Because if you're honest, you've got a list. Everyone does. It's tucked somewhere deep inside. The moments that cut too sharply to forget. The names, the memories, the words that still echo. You remember the one time you swore you'd never let it go. The betrayal that came from someone you trusted. The silence that spoke louder than any apology could. You've told yourself you're past it, that it doesn't affect you anymore. But then, without warning, something triggers it. A smell, a phrase, a tone of voice. And there is again, right back in your chest, sharp as ever. That's what makes forgiveness so difficult. It isn't just a one-time choice you make and move on from. It's a process. A slow, deliberate, sometimes painful unraveling of the past's grip on your heart. You begin to see why Jesus said it that way, 70 times 7. Not because he wanted you to become endlessly tolerant of pain, but because he knew how easily the old hurt resurfaces. Forgiveness is something you practice again and again, every time resentment tries to crawl back in. It's not about pretending the wound doesn't exist. It's about refusing to let it define who you are anymore. When you start to see it like that, the whole idea shifts. It stops being about the other person. Forgiveness becomes something deeply personal, something you do to reclaim your peace. It's not permission for someone else to hurt. You remember what peace felt like back in the story. When the storm stilled after his words, "Peace, be still." Forgiveness feels like that too. It doesn't erase the storm that happened. It just stops it from controlling the weather inside you. There's still thunder somewhere on the horizon, but it no longer owns you. That's the freedom Jesus was pointing toward. He wasn't asking for blind kindness or naivety. He was showing you how to live unshackled. Because holding on to bitterness doesn't punish anyone but you. It's like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to get sick. You sit with that for a moment, and names begin to rise in your mind. The people who hurt you, the ones you never thought you could forgive, the moments that made you shut down, build walls, stop trusting. And maybe, unexpectedly, your own name appears on that list too. The mistakes you've replayed 1,000 times. The words you wish you hadn't said. The opportunities you missed because of fear or pride. You've been carrying those too, haven't you? The self-blame, the guilt that hides beneath your daily busyness. Jesus' command covers that as well. 70 times 7 includes you. It's strange how hard it is to forgive yourself, how natural it feels to extend grace to others, but not to your own heart. You replay your regrets like old film reels, hoping the ending will change, but it never does. And yet, each time you let go, even a little, something inside you softens. The tightness loosens. The noise quiets. Forgiveness, it turns out, isn't just release, it's restoration. It makes room for peace, for clarity, for healing. And maybe that's why Jesus made it sound infinite. Because he knew that love and grace aren't meant to run out. You're not supposed to reach a limit. Every act of forgiveness creates space for something better. Peace that steadies you, love that restores you, freedom that lets you breathe again. You take a breath, and for a moment, it feels like something. You start to think about how radical this was when Jesus said it. The world back then ran on revenge. Eye for an eye, wound for wound. Mercy was considered weakness, but he turned the whole system upside down. He taught that strength wasn't about payback, but about peace. He showed that real power is the ability to let go when everything in you wants to hold on. That's a hard truth to swallow in a world that celebrates grudges, that calls vengeance justice. Forgiveness doesn't make you a doormat. It makes you free. It means you've stopped letting your pain write the story. You've taken the pen back. You can feel it, a kind of shift in how you see things. You realize that forgiving someone doesn't mean you're saying what they did was okay. It doesn't mean you trust them again or invite them back into your life. It means you're choosing to stop letting that wound define your worth. You're cutting the cord that ties you to that hurt, that moment, that version of yourself that couldn't let go. And the beauty of it is that forgiveness can happen in silence. It doesn't always require a conversation or closure or even an apology. Sometimes it's just a quiet decision inside you to stop bleeding from the same wound. And when that happens, something amazing begins to take place. The energy you've spent replaying old scenes, the weight you've carried for so long, it starts to lift. Not completely, not instantly, but piece by piece. You begin to see forgiveness not as surrender, but as strength. You realize it's the ultimate rebellion against bitterness. It's you saying, "I will not let this define me." And it's strange, isn't it? How freeing it feels to finally lay it down. You thought forgiveness would be heavy, that it would cost you something. But instead, it gives you something back. Your peace, your lightness, your sense of self, the ability to breathe without carrying the past on your back. You sit with that realization for a while. You let it sink in, maybe forgiven. And as you sit there, breathing quietly, you can almost feel it happening. A small unclenching somewhere deep inside. The name that once made your stomach twist doesn't sting quite the same. The memory still lingers, but it no longer controls the temperature of your heart. You realize forgiveness doesn't always fix the relationship. Sometimes it just fixes you. It gives you back your peace, your clarity, your ability to move forward without dragging yesterday behind you. It's humbling, this process. You find yourself letting go, not because the past deserves it, but because you do. You deserve peace. You deserve to be free. The anger and resentment you've been carrying, they've done their part. They've protected you, reminded you of your boundaries, shown you where healing was needed. But now, they've outlived their purpose. It's time to set them down. So you breathe again, this time slower, steadier. You feel lighter. The past is still there, but it no longer defines you. You can look back without being pulled under. You can remember without pain controlling the story. And as you rise to face what's next, you carry that simple truth with you. Forgiveness isn't math. It's mercy. It's not about keeping count. It's about keeping your heart open. You whisper it to yourself, almost like a prayer. Forgive 70 times 7. The numbers don't matter. The healing does. And as you walk forward, you can feel it. The storm inside finally quieting, the air around you clearer, the space within you open again. Forgiveness has done its work. It hasn't erased what happened, but it's changed what happens next. And maybe that's what Jesus meant all along. Not that you should forget, but that you should remember differently. Remember with peace. Remember with love. Remember with freedom. Because that's where healing truly begins.